Okay, we'll try this another time this night. It is. My voice is getting a little dry, so I had to go get some water, so I had to stop what I was doing. This particular book that I'm reading from is a guy named The Informer. He never gives his name because I think he was trying to protect himself, which is rightly so, because what he shares is pretty important. He had a right-hand man that was a gentleman named James Montgomery. Both of them lived in the state of North Carolina. And what they did, both of them did, they did a lot of research. They did a lot of research in the Constitution of North Carolina, all the paperwork that you could look into that before. Probably you're not going to be able to do that anymore. Who knows? I think this was actually, some of this work was actually a library, a state library, and some of it was done at University of North Carolina. I don't know if there's anywhere else. Some of it might be state archives, like in the state of South Carolina, there is state archives also. He was the reason why I knew about him many years ago. I used to listen to a program that was actually recorded. It was done by a guy from Florida, and I'm trying to think of his name. And he's the one who was very innovative out of a radio station out of Florida. This was the days when you could actually do those things from a radio station. And so it was done live, but it's also recorded, and then it was put on the internet. So this is bought this book in 2014. This was a paperback. This is probably not quite 100 pages, actually 102. Their information, you can go back to the Wayback Machine here. It's called www.atg, Against the Grain, that's what it was called, atgpress.com. And you'll go to the Wayback Machine, and then what you do is type in probably the latest date that it was actually still up. And there's important documents in that area if you decide to do that. So anyways, The Myth and Reality, Just Who Owns the United States. This is copyrighted in 2008 by The Informer. This book cost me $35. Okay, so it's all done by a printing press, so to speak. Probably a small printing company where he lived or near there. So this is the foreword. Please remember the fraud is being exposed in this book as to what the United States really is. Myths abound on the conception of the country's government, and this is what this book expresses. Always remember that the country was owned by the king, the Pope, and the crown. The British Empire consisted of the 13 plantations in America called colonies. All the first presidents were born on this British soil and were British subjects. Most were born before 1774 and could never meet the requirements written in the Constitution of 1787. No subject born on a soil foreign to the land that was called the United States could ever hold that office. Many people believe Washington and other presidents were born in the United States soil. This is not the case in the United States, had not yet been formed, are led by fraud and myth and kept in ignorance purposely. Therefore, your core beliefs of this government is founded on pure myths and fraud. This book will try to impart the real truth as to the question of what is the entity called the United States that seems to control every aspect of your life from birth to death and beyond. And the facts we have never had a government despite what you have been taught or think in your mind that you created. You have been ruled by RICO, R-I-C-O, all capital letters, establishment of a foreign powers for the last 221 years. The Black Pope is responsible for this. Now, there, what we call this is you notice the title of the book is called The Constitution for the United States. Not the Constitution of the United States, but for the United States. I did a video a couple years ago. Probably should do it again. I did it with someone else. And what happened was simply was that that basically what happened was simply is that they recorded it and did everything, but I got a chance to actually have it at one point, and then it was deleted. So I never actually had a chance to copy it myself. If I did, it's all gone. So that's it. That's water under the bridge. I just want to explain that to you. But I did do a video on this, okay, with what we call the missing 13th Amendment. Most people are unaware of this. They don't even know this. I doubt 20,000 people know this in this country. I doubt it. This was a particular amendment, which amendments, if you understand, had to be passed in order to be approved. They had to have 2/3 of the states' approval. So they had to go back to the states and had to be approved. And then actually, if they are approved, everything had to be as it was approved, just like it was written. If a period was missing or a comma was in the wrong place, it was not approved. Okay? Follow that. So the 2/3 states did approve this. And what it meant simply is it was a banishment of what we call esquires. If you don't know what an esquire is a lawyer. And I will probably do a video of a book here, Woe unto the lawyers, in the future. But what I want to share to you was simply is that it was passed. It was legitimate. They actually made copies of the what at that time was the Constitution with the 13 amendments to it. So it was actually published in a booklet and was actually distributed to schoolhouses and libraries. That all changed under the Lincoln administration, is what I understand. They were basically trying to push it away, but there were still copies somewhere that was actually not distinguished. So here's the reading of chapter 1. This is not a book full of conspiracy theories. It is simply put a book of historical facts that has been selected in context that will defy any attempt to dismiss it with the disparaging use of the term conspiracy theory. It is fact, conspiracy minus theory. In 1828, you have a Webster Dictionary defines conspiracy as a combination of men for evil purpose, comma, an agreement between two or more persons to commit some crime and concert a plot. Theory is defined in the same dictionary as mere speculation. The facts will show that there is indeed a conspiracy, and that is most definitely not a wild eye theory. From the foaming mouth of a lunatic. The appeal of this book is to reasoning faculties of those that read it by furnishing the facts of fodder for better understanding the current state of affairs in this country. Quote from The Rights of Men by Thomas Paine. Reason and ignorance, the opposition of each other, influences the great bulk of mankind. If either of these can be rendered sufficiently extensions in a country, the machinery of government goes easily on. Reason obeys itself, and ignorance submits to whatever is dictated to it. Again, that's a quote from Thomas Paine. Going on, ignorance is a state of not knowing. When reason is present, but the knowledge is lacking. The term frequently referred to nothing other than that lack of knowledge. This lack of knowledge can be corrected. It is the willful, ignorant mind, one that is purposely closed and unaccepting of knowledge, that undermines his view of the world, that will have a very difficult time accepting the simple facts presented in this book. So this is an old quote, a whole point, what I call presupposition to me. People presuppose that they know something, and so they push back whatever's out there because it rocks their boat. or is what it doesn't go along with what they've heard. So they're not willingly or desiring the truth. They just simply want to go along with the flow. Propaganda most evil goal is to promote slogans and their accompanying ideas to the point where faith and belonging are more important than facts and principal arguments. Yeah, this is the key. When you just all you got to do is watch the candidates for Senate spot or president, whatever is here. A lot of times, they will use what I call they'll promote a slogan. Building a better America. Something of that nature. And guess what? That's a slogan, and people buying that slogan, never really actually looking to any deeper, what we call the context of what they meant on that particular slogan. Okay, bringing down these fortified castles built upon the sands of contradictory and factually unsupportable belief system is the goal of this book. The sapper implement in this endeavor is the one tool that frightens those in power the most, the truth. If you were taught Santa existed after, say, 5 years old, and this continued until you were at death's bed, you would believe someone that said Santa did not. You would not believe someone that said Santa did not exist. This is what happened to the American people concerning this government and the way we live today. There happens to be a mind process called cognitive dissonance. This is where someone tells you a truth that contradicts a lie taught all your life, like the Santa Claus lie. Mentioned above, that the mind rejects the truth. This is called core belief that everyone has. It is this core belief that has to be eliminated in order to accept the truth. That's why you have to have an open heart in finding the truth. Go on. Here's an example of what I mean. I believe in Santa until I was 7 years old because my mom and dad would not lie to me, would they? I refused to believe my playmates that were told the truth at maybe 5 years old. No, can't be, said I, because the ones I trust kept telling me Santa was coming tonight and set up a tree and bring presents. Oh, I like presents. So it had to be the truth. So when finally mom and dad told me the truth, I had a hard time accepting that there was no Santa Claus. It would not leave me for another 2 years. I just had that hope they weren't lying. This is why I opened with what I did about ignorance and your mindset that you can't help but to believe a lie taught all your life. Think about that. This book probably will be the last I will write and to prove that your Santa does not exist the way it was taught you by people you trust. So let's start to try to eliminate that cognitive dissonance. In case you are wondering what it is, read this. TCD, Theory of Cognitive Dissonance. Leon Festinin, Stanford University Press in 1957. Holds that the mind involuntarily rejects information not in line with previous thoughts or actions. Festinin, I spelled that Festinger. Observe. A person can deal with the pressure generated by changing the distance, the old behavior to harmonize with its information. But if the person is committed to the old behavior and way of thinking, he simply rejects the new information. A simple I don't believe it thought or word is the easy cop out. Or if you are unaware of being unaware. To make you aware of whom the players are in this expose, the myths and the fraud upon the Americans are these three entities that rule the world today. We start with the Pope. This man of mortal failings, like all of us have, called himself the Vicar of Christ. No one else but the original Pope called himself this, and the created church called the Catholic Church. Catholic means universal, that's all. This mere mortal then set up a group of like-minded people as the Vatican. It became a corporation, a government, if you will, of the church. According to Webster Dictionary of 1828, He called the Pope a sham, as no one was ever given this character by God or by the Lord. He was a man that could read and took it upon himself to declare his vicar status so he could rule over men under the guise of the church. From this universal church, you have people that call themselves Protestant, Baptist, Mormons, etc., because they had disagreements with the Pope. In the history of the popes, it was the Pope that caused the first income tax to be laid on the people of the Vatican. So the Pope was the first man to lay an income tax on people. Did you know that? I doubt anybody knew that. This is where the first income tax on Americans came from, as those in power, mimicking the Pope's tax. Popes, either white or black, and that's not race, were not who they professed to be, as many were Satanists, and did many deviant things that the Lord said man should not do. Like when the popes used the Jewish people to pile usury in their money dealings, and after the people did that, the popes had them killed. This is well documented in Emmanuel Josephson, a great author myself. This is a doctor. He's written many books. All his books are pretty much gone. In his books that I refer into my book. So popes are human and fail like we all do, and do not deserve the title of the Vicar of Christ. Of course not. Next, we have the kings of the nations of the world. They all claim they have the divine right over man, meaning that God has given them the right to command people what to do. Sort of a mini pope, so to speak, who had control of all churches. But in this book, we are talking about the King of England. Sometimes this reign of kings and queens were called the crown. In 1600, King James took the Geneva Bible. It's a Bible that was written by John Calvin. And I don't agree with this. He's speculating, okay? But I think it's important for you to understand, where this came from. So Geneva Bible is probably one of the first Bibles written. Actually, I should say it was the first Bible. It was the first Bible that actually had notes in it. It was published in Geneva, Switzerland, and created his own version called the King James Version. In doing so, he took all the side notes out of the Geneva Bible that explained the passages. At that time, people could not read very well, and the king did this to cover the fact that he was a known homosexual and other deeds that he didn't want the subjects of him to know. Now let's tie those two together back in 1213 so you see how they affected America and you today. I did this video on this also. I think this is very key to understand. I talk about this in a Lodial title. The king was excommunicated from the church prior to 1213 for reasons I will not go into. Well, I'll tell you what he went into. I'll just get to the point. He challenged the Pope. This is all tied in with Magna Carta. And he challenged the Pope that basically he did not want a certain archbishop to be archbishop in England. And when he challenged that, the Pope came back to him and said, if you don't change your mind, I'm going to excommunicate you from the church. In fact, I think this is afterwards. Actually, what happened, he'd already did it, and then the Pope found out about it, basically from the Archbishop. And the Archbishop told him, and basically the Pope came back to him. He says, excuse me, you got a little problem here. You've been excommunicated. And what excommunication meant in those days was simply this, that your soul's going to hell. That's as simple as it is, folks. That's how it was done. So, in other words, you weren't going to heaven when you die. This is an enormous power play that the Pope does. And this also changes eventually changes the mind of King John, I think it is. And King John, the Pope also told the French king, if he doesn't back down, basically you're going to send military troops across the river, the channel there, and you're going to fight him. You're going to destroy him. Okay. So that's what happened. Eventually, the king backed down, knowing it simply as he was in trouble. And then the Pope basically took over most of what was taken over. You see, he actually got more power out of it. Problem, reaction, solution, sort of thing. Okay. So the catch was that the king had to give up his worldly possessions and all his subjects, that is his public, that is his people, to the Pope in 1213. Man, oh man, what a major move. The king agreed and became a vassal of the Pope forever, and the king's British Empire was totally owned by the Pope. Just like that. Nothing's changed, folks. Okay. Anything denoted as the British Empire anywhere in the world is now owned by the Pope, but the king could still pretend to rule the British Empire. And he got a certain percentage of the taxes, okay? Next, we have the crown, the other crown, which I will call Crown Bank throughout the book. This consisted of the international bankers of the time, and they can be found partially listing at the end of the book. The king's exchequer, his bank that was in London, was part and parcel and handed over to the Pope in 1213. Much like today in a takeover of one's bank by another bank, remember, as this is a very important in understanding the book. The Pope and the king still battle each other, as the Pope's property was, in a way, controlled by the king. Look at it this way. The king was a tenant on his property that once was his. See, he challenged someone, he played a ball game, trying to play checkers and not knowing how to play chess. But the Pope could not run everything as the king could so. He sat back in Rome and pulled the strings. Sort of like General Motors does to each divisions of cars, such as Chevrolet, Oldsmobile, and Buick. When the king refused to accept Stephen Langdon as the Archbishop of Canterbury by Pope Innocent in 1208, that's what caused the king to be excommunicated. Whether he realized it or not, he tried to deny his agreement with the Pope in 1213. But the bankers, the Crown Bank, fronted the man. To both the Pope and the king. So now we have both parties owing to the Crown bankers their debt. Pope Innocent, the White Pope, rejected Magna Carta in his papal bulls. From Josephus' book, I quote, "The Pope incited strife by using one of the few teachings of Christ he follows, such as St. Levy's alias Matthew, as Mark 2, chapter 2, verses 14, Luke 5:27 cites Jesus' followers, Matthew 10:34-36, and Luke 12:49, and 51 and 53 verses. Nothing more clearly reveals the antithesis of government and religion than these facts. Are you still with me as the bankers are sitting back taking this all in? That's why I injected it here. The Crown could care less. Their squabbles both own the Crown Bank money, and like the banks of today, could foreclose on them anytime they want. Sound familiar as to what is happening today? Did the common man have anything to say in those days as to what government was doing to him? No. Keep this in mind as to who the players are as you read this book. Do not get confused as to what crown I am referring. Do not rely on history books to explain the two crowns. Remember, Columbus was Italian and came from Italy. Where is the Pope located? Who fronted the money for his voyage? The Queen of Spain? I don't think so. But this is history you are taught. The real facts are the Italian explorer Giovanni Caboto, who sailed for England's King Henry II and became known by his Anglicized name as John Cabot. Cabot arrived in 1497 and claimed North America for the English sovereign, while Columbus was still searching for India in the Caribbean. As you see, the English sovereign refers to the King of England that already gave his total empire to the Pope. In other words, both king and Pope owe their souls to the crown bankers. So who owns what you call the United States? Who really fronts the money to find America? This book will show you that all three own the United States and how they did it, that you will never find printed in a standard history book. Remember that over the centuries, the only one of these three that changes is the international bankers. They just have different names that we could call the Old Frogles, Knights Templar, the Gilsers, the Tuscans, and others. You have the Federal Reserve of the Exchequer, the Bank of England, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, etc., all now owned and controlled by the Black Pope / Vatican. That is chapter 1. Let's continue on in chapter 2. Constitutional requirements. The Constitution requires for president are no person except a natural-born citizen or a citizen of the United States at the time of adoption of this Constitution shall be eligible to the office of president. Neither shall any person be eligible to that office who shall not attain to the age of 35 years old and have been 14 years a resident within the United States. The constitutional requirements for Congress are no person shall be a representative who shall not have attained to the age of 25 years old and have been 7 years a citizen of the United States, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of that state in which he shall be chosen. Interesting. The constitutional requirement for the Senate are no person shall be a senator who shall not attain to the age of 30 years old and been 9 years a citizen of the United States, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of that state for which it shall be chosen. Historical fact. The United States never existed before the year 1783. The reason being that from the CIA.gov website, it states when the United States was officially recognized, British America colonies broke with the mother country in 1776 and were recognized as a new nation of the United States of America, following the Treaty of Paris of 1783. The Constitution was adopted in 1787 only by those few that drafted it. I think there were only 57 that met in Philadelphia. It was never put to the people to ratify or adopt it. It became the crown and Pope's dictates to parameters of the founding fathers, so he could still control their property that was never given up by the Revolutionary War. Read the 1783 Treaty of Peace, wherein the front man for the crown, the king, actually dictates the terms of peace. Yeah, and if you win a war, folks, this is so critical. If you win a war, the loser pays the other guys for what the war cost. Do you follow me? So the loser pays payments back to the loser, the winner of the war. Sorry about that. The people sent to sign it from America did not dictate anything, and their words nowhere appear as the term writers. In other words, the most holy Trinity was the big three: the Pope, the King, the crown bankers became the Pope, owned them all. So are you getting the picture here? No wonder that this could hardly get out there, you see. So here's the membership of the very first Congress convened under the Constitution. Remember, all were British subjects born on British soil or parents. They were British subjects. President of the Senate, John Adams. President pro tem, John Langdon, Langdon. Speaker of the House, Frederick Muhlenberg. Members, there were basically estimated from 22 to 26 senators and 59 to 64 representatives. There were no non-voting members. The first session was taken in March 4, 1789 to September 29th in 1789. Note, none could hold. Second, January 4th, 1790 to August 12th, 1790. Office legally or He didn't go say a reason why. And the third part is December 6, 1790, and March 3rd, 1791, technically. All right. The above would mean that the first president to meet the requirements written in the Constitution could not hold office if he was not a natural-born citizen of the United States and lived in the United States for 14 years prior to the adoption of the Constitution. As stated above, there were no United States until 1783. Okay. That means having lived in the United States from 1783 would mean no man could hold office until 14 years later or in 1797. And he could not be born a British subject or a Chinese subject or a French subject. And when they're saying subject, citizen, that's what the word citizen means, subject. Looking at the list of presidents, it is perfectly clear that no presidents could meet the requirements, as they all were born British subjects from parents that were British subjects. The government propaganda said, Martin Van Buren, the 8th president of the United States, was a U.S. citizen. So the first 7 were not. All the rest, it's interesting, we had this whole kabashua with Obama. No one knows the real history. See, this is what people don't understand. All the rest, for the 1st to the 9th, were interlopers who did not meet the requirements written into the Constitution. They had no right whatsoever, according to the supposedly law of the land, to hold that office. Now, what gets interesting is that the first 9, with the exception of the 8, according to their written history books, were all born as British subjects on British soil. You can see that in the government documents for which I obtained the data. He even listed William Henry Harrison as the last president who was born a British subject. This is part true and part lies. They always obfuscate everything so it fits the lie that they tell you. See below, for example, that it is a lie. The question is if they did this, why can't Obama do this? You see, this is what I'm referring to. What worth is that fraud called the Constitution? Read that as con job. Didn't Bush call it a goddamn piece of paper? Sure did. Does he know something you don't know? He sure does. And I agree with you. I agree with him. You can check this out on these particular sites. And it says here, this is back in the Bush days. If someone wants this, I'll give it to them. It's a long list here, numbers, an actual website. Of course, everyone is up in arms at his statement. Here's cognitive dissonance fully at work because people believe the lie of the Constitution fed them all their lives and shows that they have no reason and closed minds. I'm sure you would rail at the statement too. So if the founding fathers let the crown, Pope / dictate what the Constitution would contain, why are we all bound to believe anything that is such a charter called a Constitution? If they don't uphold it, then why should any citizen be required to do so, such as attaining a license to merely travel, or attaining a permit to do work on your own house, or register consumer goods like your automobile, or to pay forced Social Security taxes, or pay taxes of any kind, or even become subject to their statutes? The other question is, how can anyone be bound by such a monumental fraud, and why haven't the courts brought this out, you might ask? Because at the present day, courts knew, remember, they are from the same ignorant classes or other Americans that they would not bring this out because they could not control the subjects now called citizens. Why, you ask? Well, if you ever ask an attorney and they are judges what MEM, MEUM, and TUM, TUUM is, and they don't know, I quote this from a phrase of a dictionary. That which belongs to me, that which is another. MEM, spelled MEUM, is Latin for what is mine. And TUM, TUUM, is Latin for what is thine. That goes back to natural law. I did a video on natural law also recently. If a man is said not to know the difference between MEM and TUM, it is a polite way of saying he is a thief. They would have to admit that they were told what to write by the crown as it was not of their doing, and they are a thief for the Pope's corporation. This shows how huge a fraud it is, and that alone would be to null the so-called law of the land. After all, only the bylaws apply to those that wrote the Constitution. But see further the role that attorneys play in this fraud. Hey, let's call it as it is, a con job, a big fraud on the people. I give the defining of fraud in this book. Now, when one reads my book, The Big Lie and The Big Lie 3, which is a book that the former did, you can see why I wrote that. Way before finding out from Big Al, this is someone else researched in 2008. Remember, America is the country. The United States is a place within America and is not a country. Also, what you were told were the framers signed. This is important. The Constitution had witnesses only. In law, that is impossibility to witness a document no one signed. And Lysander Spooner speaks about this, the Constitution of no authority. People are unaware of how much you've been fooled. That's the end of chapter 2. I'm going to end that tonight. It's getting late here, and my voice is basically pretty much gone. I'm not. My point here is to explain to you that almost everything in our lives since we were born is pretty much a lie. And I'm not just referring to the Constitution. I'm referring to a lot of things, folks. I'm referring to what I would call Christianity, religion, whatever you want to call it. It's a lie. All of it is a lie. And the reason why is that in the case of Christianity or any religion, they're somewhat what I would call a high priest, and they see that they're supposed to have authority over you, and they do that. And the reminder to you is that you are the authority, not them. And until you understand that, you're going to struggle with life, because simply as you see everything around you as though you give your authority away. And that's what a slave is. A slave is not just simply someone who does work. A slave is someone who doesn't know who he is. And this is how people are deceived. You know, my life is in some of these books here, not all these books, don't get me wrong. Some of these books are actually back from the seminary days that I went to seminary at Erskine Theological Seminary. Had a strong interest in teaching church history. And came to the realization that what I was studying, I think it's like the second or third year, that what I thought was true wasn't true. But I couldn't figure it out. I didn't have all the puzzle or the pieces of the puzzle connected. And I figured out, and more I researched in things that, what I thought was true or my beliefs were false, and I was wrong. And unless you come to that point simply is that you want to know, as I said earlier in another video, there's a phrase in Scripture: ask, seek, and knock. Asking first is the first, what I would call the first part. You seek it, and you knock. Meaning simply, you're more persistent. When you come to knocking on a door, you're more persistent in what you're pursuing, because you're basically saying to what I would call the creator or whatever who is in charge here, I'm asking you, and not only am I asking you, I'm seeking. So then I go out and I pursue that, thinking that these books have truth in them, and I knock on the door, and I'm persistent with it. And the creator or whoever it is gives me insight to see, wait a minute, you're all wrong here, Brant. And unless I come to that minutes of simply I am wrong, I haven't learned anything. It's being humble and saying, hey, I didn't know. And most people don't know. It's so sad in a lot of ways that it's like a cloak that what's happened on this planet, or whatever this is, a realm, or whatever you call this place. I find it deeply saddened by what I would call people who just don't care. And the sad part simply is with your attitude of you don't care, you'll never find the truth. You just won't. Care is a way of saying it's your energy. I'm putting in my energy here in this room. I'm studying. I'm seeking. It doesn't mean that these books have the truth in them. That's what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying here, folks. They may be partial pieces of truth, but not the whole truth. And no one knows the whole truth, you see. We may think we do, but we don't. And this guy, the informer, and James Montgomery spent their time and money researching this back, I think, in the late 80s or 90s. They went to Washington, D.C., the Library of Congress. There's a collection of books also that others have done. They spent time, money, that they could have done something else. Trying to reveal the truth to others. Trying to find out something doesn't fit right here. Let's look into something else. Let's see if we can find something. Let's see if this is congruent. Let's see if this is what we think is true or not. And that tenacity is simply is this. That's you don't find people like that around. You don't find people like that. The sad fact, both of them are no longer living. A lot of them people have actually tried to share the truth to you people. And I don't understand why. Do you not have a love for truth? Don't you want to know the truth? Charlotte Iserby wrote a book. It's almost impossible to get her book. In fact, I think her book is recently. What's the word I'm trying to think of? It was actually, I think it's like, if you can find the book, it's $300 or $400. And she talks about the whole issue of public education here in America, how it's been dumbed down. And the sad part simply is that's what education is all about. That is, the government public education system is to teach you not the truth, but what they want to teach you. So this is what they do, public education, and how she explains it, how they destroyed it. And then there's another gentleman, a teacher, who finally got the idea something's wrong. And he is a guy who was a teacher in New York City. And he realized something here. He came to the idea simply as all the things he'd been teaching was wrong. So he wrote a book called Underground History of Schooling in America, I think it is. And I'm trying to look at his name here. I can't think of his name. And he passed away probably 6 or 7 years ago. And there are others. And all these people in the past who are gone now, because Charlotte Iserby passed away in February this year. She passed away at, I think, 90 years old or 91. And it's critical that you understand that these people are labored immensely to expose what is false in this country, or it is a corporation. They have labored and spent their own money doing this with a passion for truth. And they didn't get everything right. Okay. I'm not saying they were perfect, but it's important for you to understand, especially, see, I'm 62 years old. Who's going to be around in 25 or 30 years, folks? Who's going to teach you anything? This is the only opportunity, in a way, as being on the internet, to basically share a wider audience for people. If you do not get it soon, it's going to be gone. And what I mean simply is that the internet will take over and there won't be any books anymore. And without books, there's not any knowledge. Now, yes, there's intuition, true. But the books are very important. And I'll explain this real quickly, and I'm going to get off here. The burning or the destruction of the city, the library in Alexandria, Egypt, is paramount because it was involved with the Catholics immensely. We know who was involved. They may have used another group, but they benefited. And so they took all those, they didn't burn those papers. They were pagan works, you see. That had history from the past, this invaluable history that was written down. Now, a lot of that's been shared. There's a reason why they have myths that are spread, but that's no longer, because simply we become what I would call civilized. And so now we write books. But in the past, that was spread to one generation to another generation. There was a responsibility to share the myths and what was the truth in that past. If you want to know the truth, it's here. If you don't, I'm afraid that man himself, mankind, is not going to be around much longer, folks. Because there is, and I've shared some things, what I would call cybernetics. I'll be sharing more in that resort as I learn more. They've been at this, they've been working at this for over 100, 200 years. In fact, far more than that. Piece by piece, they've been working at it. And what is occurring right now in front of your face is the last pieces of what I would call the bricks to actually control you. And that's it. So, you know, I'm urgently sharing this because I care. If I didn't care, I wouldn't be here. So, again, I appreciate your attendance. I appreciate you. If you have questions, I'll be glad to answer them. This is my passion. This is the truth. I've spent time in my life in finding these things, and I want other people to know the truth, because I want what I've shared is like a legacy to help others to move on, to see this, you see. If not, you know, where are we going to be? So I appreciate, again, your being here, and I wish you a good night, and you take care.